Um, Brilliant. We've got the go. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining our veterinary careers panel today. My name's Harry. I'm very excited to be moderator for this event. I've just started my career with Millie, having been a recent graduate from Durham University. So, for those who are tuning into Millie for the first time, Millie is a company dedicated to building a community for international students, school students globally. And we do that by hosting webinars and panels like this every weekend. And you can find an archive of all of our past events as well as schedules for the future at our website at milligroup.com. And if you want to keep up to date with what we have to offer, please do follow us on Instagram. There's loads of fun little things and little tidbits on how to do well in university and careers apps. So here's how our today's panel is going to look though. We have some pre-prepared questions. And you can always, please do, we do promote this hugely. Submit your own questions as and when you feel like, and I'll try and integrate them into the questions. These can be general questions for the whole panel or specific panelists, either is fine. Okay, without further ado, let's get going. So we have three wonderful panelists here today. And in short, we're just going to ask a brief introduction, where they're currently working, what they studied, and a fun fact about themselves and their name. Lovely. We'll start with you, if that's okay.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Dr. Yui Shepard. I graduated from University of Edinburgh in 2017. I currently live in New York City, working as a small animal clinical practitioner here. And then fun fact about myself, I perform ukulele at home every weekend. I am my own audience.
Wow. Composer, writer, entire band and audience at the same
Oh,
time.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, the whole shebang. Wonderful. We'll do it over Zoom next time, and we'll have a large recording.
Maybe after a couple more weeks of practicing, but yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And we'll go to Mary next, please.
Hi everyone, so I'm Mary and I qualified from University of Edinburgh in 2016 and I currently work in Manchester, UK as a first opinion practitioner. And fun fact about myself is probably that I've never owned a cat before, but I really like purring and speaking to cats in practice. And COVID and not having clients in the consult room has made this worse. So I can be heard speaking to cats when I'm consulting. So yeah.
That was amazing. That is absolutely amazing. We all wish we could speak to cats, but only if you have the gift. So, and Antonia, our last panelist.
Hi everyone, I'm Antonia. I graduated from the RVC. Sorry, that's my dog. Royal Veterinary College in 2016, and I'm currently living in Marlow, Buckinghamshire, in the UK. I'm a rotating vet intern at the Ralph Veterinary Centre in Marlow as a referral hospital. And fun fact about me would be that I am obsessed with lurchers. I have one, as you can hear, and he was asleep, but there he is.
Hey, puppy. He's so sweet.
He's actually very cat-like.
Is he? Oh, amazing. Well, maybe Mary can speak to him.
Maybe.
So we'll go straight in, but if you had to describe veterinary sciences to someone that had absolutely no knowledge, in short, how would you explain it to them? Yui, if you don't mind starting us off. Shall we jump to Mary, if that's okay?
Sorry, I think we were having a mute. I think I was muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank
So veterinary science basically deals with the treatment and healing of all types of animals other than human beings. So we're basically experts of everybody else on the planet other than people. That's my quick take on it.
That's amazing. And that's obviously a lot more than people than a lot more animals than people, hopefully. But maybe.
So I would probably really agree with you, and to add to that is it's a career, like veterinary science is a great career that has a lot of diversity. You can specialize, you can do GP work, you can do a bit of anesthesia, a bit of imaging, a bit of medicine, a bit of surgery. So it's a really diverse and really interesting career.
Thank you.
For my perspective, I would say, broadly speaking, it relates to animals' health and welfare, and mainly categorized into small animals, so our dogs and cats, large animals, so our farm animals like cows, pigs, chickens, and then equine as an own entity, and exotics, which is anything else not included in those three groups.
That's incredible. How come horses has its own subcategory?
They're very special.
They're just very special.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I'm sure all the ponies listening in the world are very pleased to hear that they're very special.
Yes. Rabbits technically come under exotics, but they're actually very close to horses.
Really?
Yeah.
You wouldn't label them together.
You wouldn't think so, but
so,
anatomically they're very similar. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Wow. Okay, so going from that, what made you want to become Vets Guy? Become vets. What was your overarching passion?
Okay, I have to try and keep this short because I'm sure everybody has a lot to say about how. I think for me, the biggest was, and the most common reason why most people become a veterinarian, from what I know, is that I've always loved animals growing up. I grew up with lots of different dogs and cats and some exotics actually in the house as well. And I grew up in Japan, and we had a significant amount of animal welfare issues that I've noticed growing up. So I kind of picked up on that from an early stage and really wanted to sort of be an advocate for animals and welfare in general. And I found that the best way to become an advocate is to become a veterinarian. So that is my short story on how I became a veterinarian.
Lovely.
So I probably am a little bit of an oddball in the vet world in that my family really didn't like pets or animals. So growing up, I went to work at a shelter. I grew up riding horses and kind of found my passion for pets that way. And then I never really actually thought about becoming a vet, but because I really enjoyed, this sounds really odd, dissection classes in biology. And I originally wanted to do like forensics related work and got told that it was such a niche market, it wasn't worth it. So when I spoke to my career counseling person at school, they kind of recommended me looking into medicine or vet med. And I ended up choosing vet med because I just I've always wanted to live with animals and have a little bit more in the sort of pet world. So hence choosing vet med.
Definitely. I think the dissection classes in my biology lesson were the ones with the least attendance, but it's good to know that there's a market somewhere.
I probably hated it. I loved it. It was definitely something that kept me very happy from school.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say I was actually quite a similar story to Yui. Just growing up, I always loved animals, had a feel for their welfare. I grew up in Hong Kong where welfare for animals isn't the best either. So quite similar, and just wanted to go into work to help them, basically.
Lovely. I mean, it sounds really really special. Again, growing up with lots of animals around. It's a very, very wonderful thing. So going into your university decisions, just before you got to university, what were some elements and pre-requirements and things you had to do to sort of get your headspace into wanting to follow this passion for animals, or wanting to follow this passion for forensics or your career counselor? What was the sort of the things that you sort of got together to point you in the right direction?
So for me, I think before I went into this field, I was actually working in journalism for a couple of years after college, after undergrad. And to get myself into the right headspace, I had to quit because I was volunteering and taking some time on my weekends at the local shelter, but I needed to kind of commit to it. And it was right after the Lehman shock. So it was like back in, well, it was 2010. So it was like a year or two after. And it was a perfect time to quit since there was a lot of cutoffs going on in my old company. So I actually left. I was in Japan up until then, but I left Japan and I moved to DC, United States, of all places, mainly because there was family nearby. And because I graduated from a liberal arts, very humanities college where I majored in sociology and anthropology, and nothing to do with veterinary medicine or the sciences. There were some additional courses I had to take, and I also had to rack up hours in some form of practice or research in relation to veterinary medicine to expose myself and to be a good candidate. So I basically found a job online at a small animal hospital in Northern Virginia. I think I ended up racking like maybe 3,000 hours total since I was working pretty much full time as a veterinary assistant.
Yeah.
And, I got to learn a lot of practical skills there even before I got into vet school, which it might be unique to the US. I'm not really sure if that's the case in the UK or other countries. And then I also took part-time classes at the local college, doing biochem, organic chemistry, calculus. I think I had to take some college physics and chemistry because I didn't have to do that at all in my undergrad. Yeah, and
that's amazing. Yeah, just to try and at least give you the bare bones to do what you want to do. So how far, just going from that, how far through into your journalism career did you realize that this wasn't for you, or was that always a stepping stone, or had you focused at the time, obviously with your previous degree, that this is something you might want to go into? And how far through did you realize you wanted to switch?
Yeah. I always had veterinary medicine in the back of my mind, but I think I was a little too scared to commit to it because I knew it was a commitment. And I always had a knack for writing and investigating and research. So that was why I initially went into journalism. And it was fun. I really loved what I was doing, but there just wasn't that sense of fulfillment that I was looking for in my career. Like I was really making a difference. So I think that, and then kind of not really feeling like it was sustainable financially. Not irony, because there's that whole thing in veterinary medicine with that too. But that basically was what sort of pushed me. And I thought, I'm only young once. And if I make a mistake, I'm still in my 20s. I can always go back. If it doesn't work out, it's fine. But I just wanted to give it a shot. And that's kind of how I just went for it.
Exactly. And hopefully in later life, you can combine the two by writing your memoirs on veterinary science as well.
There you go. Yeah.
It all comes around. Amazing. Mary, if we wouldn't mind getting your take as well.
So mine was a little bit not as exciting as you, Journey. I basically, after speaking to my career counselor that you do get in schools, I went so our school at that time had the IB courses. So basically you get courses in the higher level and standard level. And I think it might have changed, but the entry requirements for most of the UK universities at that time were higher level, like 2 sciences, so I had chemistry and biology, and then maths as a minimum of standard or higher level. So that's basically the courses that you kind of have to select on the IB course. And they also required, obviously, to do a lot of work placements before you actually apply. And for me, it was volunteering at shelters, because even before I decided to go into veterinary, I had about like 4 to 6 years of working in a shelter. So that was a key experience. And also just seeing practice in small animal practice. They usually require and request that you've had exposure to farm animals. And I had 0 when I applied. But I think it was the universities were quite understanding, because at that time I was based in China, and there weren't any abattoirs or any farm places that were happy taking on students, because that's just not the norm they have there. So my application was actually lacking in part of what I think is a huge part if you apply from within the UK. But yeah, that's pretty much, I think, what I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing to hear that they have such a strong sort of specification for farm animals as well. So definitely sort of difficult if you're in the city, but can really hopefully sort of focus on the animal shelters as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely. Thank you.
My history is quite similar to Mary's. My high school I did the IB as well. So I would agree with the 3 higher levels, biology as a must, and then another science, and a math as standard. Work experience really important. And some of the universities in the UK also require BMAT, so Cambridge. And I don't remember if Edinburgh did, but I think you guys would be able to answer that. But yeah.
Amazing. And did you have a lot of experience prior as well in shelters, or not so much?
I did, yeah. So I spent a lot of my teenage years in shelters, definitely. 0 farm animal abattoir. I rode horses, so I spent a lot of time in stables. I also made effort to sort of do animal shelter work with wildlife. So I went to South Africa for a couple of weeks for interest and for fun. But I think that helped with application as well. So something exotic or different could stand out if that's something you're interested in.
Definitely. So it's an element of commitment definitely sort of needed.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so again, very general, you guys, what made you all study in the UK? What was the overarching theme there?
So people are probably wondering why the hell I ended up, I'm sorry, I said hell. Why I ended up in the UK when I grew up in Japan and lived in the US before coming to going to Edinburgh. And the short answer to that is I was just more attracted to veterinary schools in the UK than I was in the US. I think the biggest influence of that was at the clinic I was working at. My favorite doctor there, Dr. Tan, graduated from Glasgow. And the way she handled her patients and the way she carried herself and the way she worked with everybody else, including me, was just everything that I aspired to be like. I think I had like a minor girl crush on her. She was just incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly kind and compassionate to her patients, just very detailed, but also she had a very egalitarian way of working, which I really appreciated. Some people you work with in vet med, there's a real hierarchy, and I find that particularly to be the case for some reason with some like veterinary technicians or nurses, and some doctors for sure that's been doing this for a long time. But for her, I felt like she really thought of everybody as equal, and I just really loved her overall view of that. And that may have just been her and not the school she graduated from. But when I spoke to her about, which colleges I should apply to, she said, definitely look into UK schools. And then once I started looking into UK schools, I realized that when it comes to animal welfare, UK vet schools definitely hold that in very high regard. Anatomy classes and dissection classes are using cadavers that were from, at least in Edinburgh, cadavers were used, the bodies were used basically from dogs or cats that were put to sleep because they had to be put to sleep, whether from illnesses or because of quality of life or because they were from a shelter and there was just, no possibility for them to be adopted for whatever reason. Whereas in the US, it tends to be more so, and I think this is changing, but the cadavers are from animals who were raised primarily to be used as cadavers. And there was a real ethical dilemma for me there. And also I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. So I thought, you know what? I want to move to Edinburgh. It's like the perfect place.
Yeah, exactly. Got to go find her cafe.
Exactly. So that's my reason.
And just quickly, Yui, because this is more relevant to yourself, but was there a difference in applying to the UK and US as well? So
Yes.
US having more specification for
Yes.
your background being more.
Yep, that's
Okay.
definitely another good reason why I decided to apply to the UK school was in order for me to apply to the US schools, I had to take another additional year of further courses.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they are anymore because this is like almost 10 years ago now. But
They obviously made all the difference.
yeah, but I was already 20 since I graduated from college and then worked for a few years and then decided to do all this. I was already 25 at the time. So although there are students who go in much later in their life as well, there were some who were already in their 30s when they started vet school with me. I kind of felt like I'd rather start school in my 20s instead of my 30s. And there was also the GRE that you have to take in the US vet school. And I'm really not a fan of standardized tests for a lot of different reasons. And I just didn't want to take it. And also tuition wise, I kind of realized that unless I get accepted to the in-state vet school, which was in Virginia, and I wasn't really interested in applying to that school. Basically, the tuition wasn't all that different because out-of-state tuition in the US is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
So it just felt like the right decision for me.
Definitely. Is there a difference in years as well? So it would have been 5 years in the US versus 4?
It would be 4 years in the US.
Okay.
If you entered from the graduate entry program, the GEP in from at least in the University of Edinburgh, and I think RVC as well, then it would be 4 years. And those are for people who graduated with an undergrad degree and Bachelor of Science, or I think a minimum of certain credits in the sciences. But I went through the 5 years since my bachelor is in the arts, not the sciences. But even then, the tuition ended up being actually a little less than a lot of the out-of-state tuition here.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect it, but then again, fees in America are extortionate.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing is that I found that a lot of the vet school in the UK, because they accepted students from all over the world, it had a more diverse demographic. So growing up in an international school, to me, that was a much more comfortable environment to be in, just people from all over the world. So that was also another big factor for me.
Really interesting. Okay, amazing. I hadn't clocked. I would have thought that there would be sort of similar levels of diversity everywhere, but no, it's really, really interesting.
Oh, you're done.
Good to
know. So I came to the UK probably more because it's just a shorter course in general. Like it's 5 years, but you can go straight in from high school into the undergraduate course. So it's a bachelor's degree in the UK. Whereas in the US, you have to obviously do undergrad and accumulate enough credits to then go on to a veterinary university. And the total year and the cost involved in that is quite a lot if you already know you're going into veterinary. So I came straight to the UK because of that. The other aspect as well is just I had family in the UK, so it was really easy for me to settle in and kind of looked after when I first came here. So that's basically it. The other option, I guess, was sort of Australia, but I didn't know anyone there at that time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. Now thinking back, it was just fairly straightforward, but yeah.
There was no underarching ties to Harry Potter or to Edinburgh in general.
So I chose Edinburgh. So I applied to Edinburgh, Glasgow, Liverpool, and Nottingham. And the reason why I chose Edinburgh, and don't take my word for it because it's not accurate, is I saw Edinburgh on a sunny day. That was literally my only reason for choosing Edinburgh. Like there was none of this, like, I like all the courses for me at that time as a high school student, I didn't know like the exact differences, but I came and visited like all the cities and I loved Edinburgh because I saw it on a sunny day. And I came and realized that only happens for like 10 days of the year. So
yeah, I was going to say throughout your entire time there, how many days sunny with it? But you just get used to going to the beach in the rain.
Yeah, I don't recommend choosing universities based on the weather, but it's still a beautiful city and I love the 5 years that I spent there. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, yeah, I was actually really similar to Mary in that coming from international school background, the three options I had was UK, US, and Australia for vet school. Being from Hong Kong, Taiwan technically was a choice as well, but I think I was a bit more ambitious and wanted to go more abroad. And the UK vet schools have a very, very high reputation in the world and such a long history. Those are the main reasons I think I went for it. And in terms of distance to home as well, that was the reason I chose RVC over Edinburgh, because Edinburgh would have been an extra flight from home, from London. But Edinburgh is actually where I actually really loved the campus as well. I didn't see it on a sunny day, but I still really liked it. But what stopped me was the distance. I don't regret my decision, but UK wise, I think the vet schools are all very good, and there are new ones coming up as well. Surrey is quite a new school, and I think there are going to be more opening. I don't know much about US, but I didn't want to go for US at the time because I didn't want to sit the SATs. So quite similar to Yuri. I just didn't want to
do the standardized tests. Yeah.
So I just went for UK, and I knew I wanted to be vet, and it was a shorter, more direct route. So yeah, that would be why.
Did you have to take the BMAT for?
I did take
RVC?
It, yes, for Cambridge.
Yeah.
Not for RVC. RVC just needed sort of work experience and personal statement. So that.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. We'll just have if there's any questions, guys, please don't be afraid to post them in the chat, and I'll push them forwards to the relevant panelists. Okay, so when you guys were at uni, what was your most challenging class? What thing did you find, I really don't click with this immediately? This is going to take way too much of my brain power.
So they're all very challenging. Brain power, I guess. I enjoyed it, but definitely the most challenging course for me was neurology. But I can't remember the name of the professor. I think actually Mary might remember, because Mary graduated a year before I did. But she was a special person. And I think she knows exactly who I'm talking about. I can't remember who she is, but she's tall, blonde-haired, short-haired lady. Amazing, extremely intelligent woman, but definitely very demanding, very challenging with the neural courses. But she did make it very as easy as possible to study for it in different ways. She, recorded all her classes. So it was challenging, but I did really enjoy it. Not so much brain power. What I really did not like and click with was farm animal medicine. It just was not my thing. So I knew it going in, and I was just even more convinced that it was not my thing once they started taking the classes with clinical and the lectures as well.
So how did you persevere? How did you get through it? Grit your teeth and think it was only a year, or?
Yeah, just drank a lot of coffee and played a lot of music to try and get myself to focus, and did some study groups as well with friends who were more keen on farm medicine too. And I just sort of faked it till I made it. Really.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So the course that I probably struggled the most with at university was actually orthopedics and surgery, because as an undergrad you do your dissection and then that's pretty much your anatomy lessons all done in first year, and you don't do any of the sort of pathology or the surgery stuff until year 3 for the dog and cat course. And what this meant was my anatomy was very pretty much non-existent by that stage, and orthopedics in particular, because it's actually very specialized. Trying to get your head around it, even just memorizing the bones, I remember, was such a pain. And yeah, that was, for me, that was the most challenging course. And looking back and thinking back, I still cringe when I think about it. But yeah, that's certainly the one I struggled with the most. And the neurologist that Yui mentioned, her name is Caroline Hahn. She is an incredible lady, and she is a character that you don't forget.
Yeah, definitely. I find it amazing that, you know, it's hard enough learning the biology of one animal, let alone the anatomy of various different animals, all with completely different bone structures and everything. So the list would have been endless.
For me, I would say I struggled a lot with parasitology. I remember it was 2 massive books of parasites and across the different species and their specific biological names, the life cycles. It was just very, very hard to study. Just had to keep doing it, basically, like with anything else. And I also really struggled with farm. I am a massively outdoorsy person, but it was just so cold, all of it. It's just so cold and wet.
Did you always do farm in the spring term, or, you know, or
oh
Christmas,
no, you were in Wales in January, you know,
and
doing just outdoors all day, every day. It was just very cold. But a hot cup of tea saves your life. But yeah, I really struggled with both clinically and sort of the practical aspects of farm, having not grown up around farms or anything near the countryside. It was hard because a lot of my sort of peers were, you know, grew up either in a farm or were very closely related to either farmers or the farming industry. So I felt really inexperienced in that aspect. So it was a really steep learning curve. You know, one of the things we had to do for a practical OSCE in the end was to tip a sheep on your own in 3 minutes.
So I mean, it sounds really comical as well. It sounds quite entertaining.
I managed.
Sort of having loads of students running around.
You could sign up to sort of use the sheep at the college to practice your skills to tip a sheep. So practice makes perfect.
Yeah, that sounds like an initiation rather than a part of the course.
It is
That's
both.
incredible. Yeah. And did you find who was harder to deal with, the animals or the farmers? What was the...
Oh, definitely farmers.
Yeah.
Some of them are very
touchy
lovely.
against their sheep. Yeah.
But yes, you have to be quite careful what you say.
Definitely. Amazing. And going on to the highlights of your class, what was your favorite class and why?
I think my favorite class was actually surgery, because I'm definitely more of a hands-on person and I'm a visual learner. So it was a lot more of a smooth process studying surgery, and I really loved the practical aspect of it as well. Yeah, surgery was my favorite. Small animals.
Amazing.
Not farm.
Yeah, small animals, not the farms, definitely.
My favorite was actually totally unrelated to what I'm practicing now. I actually really loved equine, like from the lectures to the actual practical and the rotations. I think because I grew up riding horses, and even though I never intended to become an equine vet, I just found it fascinating. And the equine staff tend to be really laid back and really lovely to be around, whereas small animal hospital can be a bit intense. And the equine lectures as well, they were, so just as like a rough example, some of the equine lectures, you'd spend one entire lecture talking about laminitis, like a disease in horses, just a single disease. And the dog and cat course, you might spend one lecture going through 10 to 20 diseases. So it was a lot less material to learn, but also just the practical of being around horses. And I found that a little bit more interesting compared to the small animal side of things.
Definitely. It sort of hopefully helps you focus as well and really get to grips with each individual one. as opposed to forgetting, only just getting the names of the diseases.
Definitely.
I think in terms of preclinical, my favorite was anatomy classes. It was just really fascinating actually learning about all of the structures in the different species and the differences. And in terms of clinical years, I actually really enjoyed anesthesia. Not something I would think, but I just found it interesting how we use drugs to be able to induce certain states. Obviously, it comes from humans, but yeah, that was one of my
definitely. And what was the biggest surprise you were most shocked by in the difference between certain animals in their anatomy?
I actually think, if anything, as much as there are differences, actually they're all very similar.
Okay.
There are variations in
definitely
things, but actually amongst mammals, actually they all have the same structure or the same basis. So that was really interesting.
4 legs, 2 ears, hopefully something in the middle.
Same organs.
Yeah. Amazing. And just going from that, actually, I think it sort of fits in quite nicely. What was the sort of split between lectures and practicals in your classes? So what was the format? How many lectures, hours of practicals did you have to do for sort of each one?
So I have to really think back because it's been a while, but at least in Edinburgh, the first 2 years is considered preclinical, and it's mainly lectures and practicals, mostly lectures. And anatomy, from what I remember, anatomy class was what stands out as having both lectures and practicals and kind of the weight of both. I tend to forget things once they're not necessary. So there's certain chunks of my memory from vet school, and maybe it's because there's some trauma involved that I've like completely blacked out now. So I think I need Millie to help me remember. But the first 2 years are preclinical, mainly lectures, and then third year to fifth year, or third year, fourth year is more hands-on. Lectures continue, but there's more hands-on practical work. Especially in equine and farm. And then fifth year in Edinburgh is all clinical rotation. So lectures are done by the end of fourth year, and then fifth year on, you basically get sort of the first half of the year is clinical rotation in small animal, equine, and farm and exotics. So you'd have to do all of those different sectors. And then the second half, you get to choose where you want to focus on. So, if you want to focus on equine medicine, then you can just do equine medicine for the rest of the time. And then for me, I wanted to do small animals. So I just focused on the different departments in small animal medicine. You can choose within small animal, like surgery or orthopedics or emergency, soft tissue surgery, cardiovascular, and the likes. So at least for me, the fifth year was my favorite because it was really just all about clinical rotation, getting like that real life experience.
Definitely. Wow. And that was when you could focus on your small animals as well.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So because I did the same, I'm only a year apart from UE, so I don't think it'd be much different. But yeah, so the preclinical years, a lot of the practicals are focusing on anatomy dissections, and there was a lot of like parasitology practicals. When you get into your clinical years, that's where, for me, that was more the fun practicals. There was a lot less of the husbandry and more of the actual like practicing surgical skills, learning how to do stuff in clinic, like setting up IV drips, placing catheters. I think from my experience of speaking to other UK graduates, I think Edinburgh does have a good chunk of practical clinical skills that set that you graduate with, because they, like our year, got to practice, like we got to practice epidurals and locals when we were at uni. We had a lot of dental practicals as well to practice skilling and polishing and extractions. So I quite enjoyed that aspect in the clinical years. And like Yui says, the last year in final year rotations, you're basically always doing hands-on stuff, and they took out a lot of the repeated lectures from the years before. So that's definitely
amazing.
Really
just made
good.
it a lot more fluid.
Yeah.
It's actually really similar in terms of structure for RVC. 2 preclinical years, 3 clinical years, and preclinicals mostly lectures, and husbandry and practicals, with anatomy, some microbiology, and clinical years would be lectures but about clinical sort of diseases, and then practicals would be more real world, hands-on, practicing sort of blocks, actual clinical skills, and the ability to choose more towards what you would like to go gear towards. So farm, equine, smallies. And then other than that, there's also placements, which I think we will talk about later, called extramural
Definitely.
placements.
Well, no, please do. It's super interesting. We'll feed into that. I'll jump into that right now. So again, what was the weighting of placements, and how did you organize them? Did you sort of were you prompted as to who you could apply to, or did you have a complete free field? Was the floor completely open to you and what you wanted to do? So yeah, we'll move into placements in your degree.
So in, I think, both RVC and Edinburgh Uni, we had the extramural studies, where you needed to fulfill certain number of hours in different aspects of veterinary medicine, mainly small animal, farm, equine. I think those are the 3 main. And this is the rite of passage in vet med in the UK. You had to do lambing, at least in Edinburgh. I think Antonia's smiling and nodding, so RVC is the same as well, it seems. And then once you have certain number of hours that is designated per species or per field, then you can focus more on your interests and create your EMS opportunity the way you want. And you can do your EMS anywhere in the world. They're really not restricting, which is really great. Some of my friends in vet school, one of them went to Hawaii and studied turtles and turtle rehabilitation, which is awesome. And I wish I did that. Quite a few of my friends also went to South Africa as well, and worked with wildlife sanctuaries, which also really awesome. I was really boring. And also, granted, these are not cheap to do. You have to pay out of pocket, for yourself.
That's what I was thinking.
And since, I was student loans, I was being a little bit more frugal. But what I did, and my favorite, was I went to Cyprus and worked at an animal shelter there. And that place was great because they allowed hands-on work. And I did a lot of spaying and neutering in my 4th year of vet school in Cyprus for 2 weeks. Spaying and neutering mainly cats and dogs, cats through their TNR program, the Trap, Neuter, Release program. So it's really great. You got to make a good impact, and you also got a lot of experience done.
Amazing. So you got your little dose of sun as well.
I did.
Missing out on from Edinburgh.
We work from 9 to 2 doing surgery, and then after that, I just went to the beach and hung out.
Amazing.
Awesome. I also ended up adopting a dog. He's sleeping.
Do you still have him? Oh, lovely.
Yeah, he's right there on the couch. He's sleeping.
Oh, cute. Amazing.
So I think it was 26 weeks of husbandry. So if you go into the degree wanting summer breaks and vacations, it's not the right degree for you, because within 2 years, you have 26 weeks of the husbandry, and between 3rd and final year, you have to complete, I think it's 52 weeks of clinical, or is it another 20? Yeah, 52 weeks. So if you think about it, 52 weeks is essentially a year. So you do actually have to fit quite a lot of that around your holidays, and it takes a good chunk out of your holiday time. But what I also like about how the UK universities run this is, so I don't know a lot of specifics about the US universities, but from what I've heard from friends, a lot of the universities track you in the US. So you select really early on if you want to just do farm, just do small animal, or just do equine. Whereas the way that the EMS structure works in the UK, it's quite nice because you can use that to explore what you like and don't like about the veterinary world. It's a really good opportunity to like try out different things. So one of my colleagues, she went into vet school adamant that she was going to work in avian medicine. So she only wanted to do work with birds. And after doing a lot of like work experience and going through the years, she's now a specialist in emergency medicine and small animal practice. So she's done a complete changeover, and the same vice versa. Wow. Some people go in wanting to do farm and end up just doing small animals. So I think the way that the EMS works, it's you get as much out of it as you put into it. And if you use the opportunity to explore different career options, you do get a really good idea of what you want to do when you graduate.
Definitely. And that 52 weeks was over your entire 4 years? Or you just had to stay a whole year at the end if you hadn't done it?
No, so the 52 weeks is fitted in between your 3rd and 5th year. So it's basically clinical practice. So they require that you do a minimum of how many weeks? I think it's 2 weeks each that Edinburgh set for like equine, farm, and small animal. But the rest of the weeks, like Yui says, you can do anything. You can go do charity, you can go abroad, you can do whatever you want with it. So other than the minimal requirements, you can pretty much do whatever you want, which is quite nice.
Yeah, but the minimum requirements are quite punchy.
Yeah.
So following on to Yui and Mary's point, it is very flexible. The minimum, so for the preclinical, which is 26 weeks, are mainly husbandry. So I think for mine, it was 2 weeks equine, 2 weeks smallies, and 2 weeks farm, and then just anything else you want. And then for clinical, it's quite similar. So it's just the basics of those 3, and then you can fill the rest with what you prefer. So vet med in the UK is designed to, when you're graduated, you are competent in all 3 species. So you're able to go and work within whichever field you prefer. But in your year of study, you can customize and design your own sort of degree to be more what you would like. So for me, I made it work in that I split all of my remainder. I knew I wanted to do smallies, and I split my clinical practice between practices in the UK and practices back home in Hong Kong. So I could also spend some time at home, even though it wasn't holiday, but just being able to be there and experience what practice is like. Because I didn't actually do much work experience in clinics when I was in high school. It was really useful to do that as a vet student in my final years.
Yeah, definitely.
It's nice to have flexibility like that.
Yeah. No, it sounds incredible. And it was all wonderful being able to choose your own path and have the freedom to, if you do, go and do some amazing things. Just from that, are there scholarship opportunities to go and do, or were there that you knew of to go and study abroad, or was it more just do off your own back? If anyone, that was for anyone and everyone.
There are scholarship opportunities in the UK, but I think they're mainly focused on local British students.
Sure.
I think I saw something about financial aid, but it really wasn't something that I felt was significant for international students. So I didn't really pursue it. I didn't really do a lot of research on scholarships and financial aid prior to vet school, so I'm not really sure, but that's my limited understanding. There is some offering for more so local students, but limited for international students. But I could be wrong, and they may have changed it over the last 5-10 years.
Definitely.
So from what I know, if you apply to the US universities, there are more opportunities for scholarships, but again, it depends on your nationality and stuff. And the ones in the UK, At my time, there was only one called like the Global Undergraduate Scholarship, which I think was around £2,000 a year. So
Okay.
yeah, it's not still not a lot compared to, say, if you were Scottish, you had your entire education for free.
Yeah.
But it definitely helped with the tuition fees. But the thing to mention as well with the EMS is, yes, you pay it out of your pocket, but you don't have to spend, like, I had to watch how much I was spending through uni, but I had great opportunities, like my husbandry, my favorite. I used the opportunity. So like I went to an alpaca farm in Scotland. That was my husbandry.
Wow.
And that literally just cost me a train ticket because my EMS provider provided accommodation. And when I did my farm placement in clinical years, I found a farm practice on the Isle of Skye and basically spent 2 weeks traveling around the Isle of Skye with this farm vet in a van. And again, all that cost me was getting a ticket and getting the ferry across the Isle of Skye. So there are ways that you can have fun and enjoy your placements without sort of having a lot of backup financially.
Definitely. And maybe spending some money on like some kid raincoats as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think to my knowledge, there are some scholarship for these things, but mainly for local students. They're quite limited.
Okay.
And I think for placements, you don't need to be, you don't need a lot of money necessarily to be able to have a good one.
Definitely. So we'll have one more question on sort of the university side, and then we'll go digging into your careers. I'm a bit conscious that we might run slightly over, as there is obviously so much that you guys have done in your careers that we'd love to try and get a basic transcription of. So what's also in choosing your EMAs, was there a lot of support from the tutors and also in your work and in your studies? So was there good academic sort of support system as well while you were at university?
So Edinburgh does have a system set up so that from first year you are assigned a tutor, and then unless you want to change your tutors, which you absolutely can, and some of my friends have, you basically have that same tutor for your entire academic career. If you can always contact them, and it's all about making sure that you're on the right track and you're succeeding. And if you are struggling academically, then they are there to support you and offer, additional help if needed, either to set something up for you, or if they happen to be the professor who is lecturing particular lecture that you're struggling, then, they'll obviously be able to set something up to go over things with you. I think there was maybe, if you don't need them that often, I think there was a standard of meeting with them twice a year, I want to say, mainly to go over, from what I remember, the major exam results, or maybe it was 4 times a year. Again, blacking out from all the trauma. And so they would go through the questions that you couldn't answer, and if you did well, then great. It's a very short meeting, and then just make sure that you're also mentally you're doing okay. But if you struggled in an exam, or you didn't get the grades that you wanted to get, or you really struggle with something, then they will go over that. And what I liked at least about my mentor was he was very non-judgmental in my struggles, and particularly because obviously I think Antonia and Mary may be the same. I moved from another country into Scotland that I've never been to before, and there's no support system set up for me there other than school. Having him to me was a huge lifesaver. I think if Edinburgh didn't have a mentor set up, I wouldn't be surprised if I couldn't make it through. So for me, it was at least very significant that I had him.
Yeah, hugely supportive.
So I guess following on from Yui's point, so the other thing to consider, I guess, going back to selecting universities, places like RVC, Glasgow, and Edinburgh tend to have a huge influx of international students because they have the AVMA, which is the American Vet Board. They have that accreditation. So they have a much better support system in place to look after international students, which I think is really good. And I know, like, for example, there was one year at Edinburgh, they conducted interviews overseas. I think one of our lecturers went to Singapore to conduct interviews. It was quite nice to get that sort of, so they're quite used to having international students on board. The other aspect of support, I guess, again, something to utilize whilst you're a student is the EMS practices. So I had my designated mentor at uni like Yui did, but the person that I actually stayed in touch the most was a vet that I met through EMS that I kept going back to. And he rang me up every 6 months after I qualified to check how I was getting on, how I was like settling in my new practice. And we're still in touch. We're kind of friends now, so it's really nice.
Amazing.
So that was definitely something that I really appreciated from seeing practice and doing the EMS work.
Lovely.
So obviously it's quite similar. We get assigned a tutor, separate from sort of lectures and things, one per, I think, 5 people. And you can go to them for any reason, academic or not. And they're always available, you can always just drop them an email. But I think, following to Mary's point, I think throughout your time in vet school, you do meet a lot of vets, a lot of professors along the way, and it's not just your tutor who can support you, and they are generally very good if there's anything you need. So yeah,
definitely no, it sounds amazing. It sounds very sort of solid. I'm just going to ask all the panelists if you had 10 minutes spare just to run through a few careers questions. I'm very conscious of the time that we've got so caught up in the university life. I know it's far too easy to living back the glory days or traumatic days. So if you guys, I don't know what your plans are after this, but if you had 10 minutes spare now, that would be amazing just to run through some of the career aspects as well. Lovely. So one again for career side, how does a UK accreditation affect your ability to study abroad, and what are you able to do studying abroad with a UK accredited degree?
Do you mean like working abroad with a UK?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So the big takeaway, and I should have mentioned this when you asked why I applied to vet school, because this was also a big one, was that especially if it's AVMA accredited, it really does allow you to work in a lot of different countries in the world. So being AVMA accredited means that, you can obviously work in the United States without having to take any extra exam other than the NAVLE, which is the National American Veterinary license exam. And that's something everybody has to take. So even if you graduated from a US vet school, you have to take that. That's the board exam of this country. And then if you want to work in certain states, then of course there's a state license exam in at least California and Hawaii. But other than that, that's the same. So in that sense, it's really amazing because it can expand your opportunities. I think you can also work in certain Southern American countries as well, if you're interested in that. You can definitely work in Hong Kong. You can definitely work in Singapore as well, and obviously in Europe in general. It really allows you to kind of really explore, just be adventurous. So that was huge when it came to graduating from a vet school with an AVMA accreditation, and just graduating from a British veterinary school. If you graduated from a US vet school, then obviously you can work in the US, but you can't really work in other countries unless you take their extra courses or have to do some extra registration.
Definitely.
So that's a big part. Yeah.
So on top of everywhere that Yui's mentioned, with the UK accreditation, you can also work in Australia and New Zealand without any further testing exams, so you just have to register. And I've also met a locum vet before. She always travels and works at the same time. So she practiced in Dubai as well, I believe. So you can pretty much go to most of the world with a UK vet degree, which is really amazing because it's not the same for, like, my colleagues are European and they can't do that, vice versa. So previously under the EU, whatever arrangement they had, you could come to the UK and work. And that's going to change after Brexit. But I imagine that UK vets will still be able to go to Europe, but European vets can't just register in places like New Zealand or Australia. So
really interesting. Yeah, definitely.
So definitely the UK degree gives you a lot of versatility and a lot of freedom to do pretty much go to most places in the world.
That's incredible. It's weird that you know, certain schools can't come here, but we can go there, or you know, things like that. That's very, very odd.
Yeah, I agree that the being MRCVS, which is what you get with the UK degree, is a member of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, opens a lot of doors, and it's really useful.
Definitely. And are you just able to quickly explain the AVMA that stands for? Just getting the acronym AVMA.
American Veterinary Medical Association. Is that
lovely? Is that correct to you? Just making sure we've got that.
Yep, that's correct. And then Antonia mentioned MRCVS, which is the member of Royal College of Veterinary Surgeon.
Perfect.
The British one.
Awesome. Thank you. I directed that the wrong way around. Sorry. But no, okay. Thank you very much. A bit more on the breadth of your career. Where have some of your mates ended up? Course friends from universities in vet meds. So maybe not in practicing veterinarians.
So all over really. I think a chunk of my friends are working in the UK or farm and smallies. In the US, there's a few that went into specialty. So one of my friend is I think she's getting board certified next year in lab animal medicine.
Wow. Okay.
And then another has been doing emergency for 5 years, and that's her passion, and that's the only thing that she will ever do for the rest of her life until she completely burns out. That's what she said. And then another is she went into wildlife medicine, which is a really difficult career to start because it's just very limited. But she somehow managed to find a way in. So she's doing wildlife as well. But for the most part, everyone's either in North America, UK, or Singapore.
Amazing. And what can you do? So what are the possibilities with a vet med degree?
Yeah, so obviously you can go into clinical work, practice, which is where most of us start. You can also go into research as well, which can be based on like governmental research. So in the US, there are veterinarians that work for CDC. You can also go into corporate if you're interested in going into corporate as well. You know, pet food companies are like probably the biggest one that people would maybe think of where veterinarians work there. You can also obviously go into nonprofit as well, which is where I sort of in the beginning started off thinking I'd wanted to go into and then realized it's not sustainable in the long run, at least for now. You know, there's a few where veterinarians are starting to look into entrepreneurship. So that's another sort of new way in. You can also, you know, go into, when it comes to especially research, there's a lot that you can do, especially in public health policy, since veterinarians are key people when it comes to public health, especially in the sense of the One Health concept as well, where, you know, we're at the forefront of that, and where, you know, it's an approach that really takes into account the connection between human health, animal health, and environmental health.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of veterinarians I know also work in the infectious disease aspect as well, and contributed in like the whole COVID-19 research during this pandemic. So there's really, there's a lot you can go into. There is, it's just a very versatile and flexible degree to have, and it's not just limited to seeing dogs and cats.
Yeah, that also helps and is nice. We're actually going to, I hope you don't mind, we'll come into the One Health and COVID side in next few questions, because I think that's just super interesting.
So most of my friends are still in small animal practice, but other than the huge list that you've already provided, you can also go into something that's completely like non-veterinary related, but there's also opportunities for like mobile vet work. Or I know a friend that's now doing like mental health for vets and just doing lectures and doing the wider sort of completely non-clinical education for vets. You can also go into to actually support vets and other professions as well, I guess, in a way, just looking at mental health in professionals in general. You can also go into pharmaceuticals. So I've got a friend working in Hills and Royal Canin, sort of the food side of things, or you can go into some of the bigger brands that produce the actual veterinary products. You then end up, I guess, dealing less with the public and just speaking to professional and vets in general. I also know someone who later on went to work for Colgate, so completely non-veterinary related, toothbrush and toothpaste industry. So like, it's a good degree to have because it proves that you can work hard and you're capable of doing like working with a lot of information. So even if you plan on doing something completely non-veterinary or even vet science related, there's other things that you can easily step into.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't have too much to add. I think Mary and Yui covered that really well. So yeah.
Amazing. No, thank you. So very briefly, guys, what's your current sort of day-to-day looking like, and how's that sort of changed with COVID as well? Have there been any major changes as well? So sort of interlinking two possibly quite large questions, but we'll try and get a brief outline.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief. So for me in New York City, when COVID hit, we basically went straight into curbside practice, which basically means that clients weren't allowed inside. Usually a technician would come out, get some history, take the patient in, and then I would assess the patient, call the owner on the phone to get a little bit more detailed history. Basically just do everything's the same, but except the owners aren't allowed inside, and I had to communicate with them over the phone.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that I think is like the standard in most practices.
And what would be your sort of day-to-day as a brief synopsis normally? Again, caring for the animal, coming in, having patients come in and doing case by case?
So for me, being in a GP practice, it's appointment based. Granted, sometimes there are emergency walk-ins that I would try to make room for as drop-offs, which basically means that the owner would drop the animal off if they're stable. And then I will call them later, usually during my lunch hour or my 15-minute break or in between appointments. But yeah, if the schedule's packed and it's really just like rotating through all the different cases, and it could be anything from like quick vaccine exam, puppy kitten exams. You just vaccinate them and talk to them about husbandry aspect of having a dog and a cat, or it could be a sick case where you have to do like a full workup. If there's in-house machines, and you can use like diagnostics in-house with like x-rays or ultrasound or bloods. And then if you're, in my clinic's case in the past, we did overnight care as well. So I would hospitalize the patients that I felt were sick and needed the extra care and come up with a treatment plan. Big aspect also is finance for clients, since there are pet insurance, but a lot of people don't have pet insurance in this country. So also talking about finance was part of my job as well. Negotiating and sometimes compromising certain treatment or certain diagnostics because owners can't afford it. That's like an entirely other thing, and there's no time for it. But yeah, that's kind of the overall day to day. And then by the end of the day, I'm in bed, asleep, done.
Shattered. It's an incredibly holistic sort of approach to looking at everything and everything you can do on the people side and on the animal. It sounds
and living in a
super
big
varied.
city, you can refer if you are overwhelmed or if you feel like it's a very complex case or it's an emergency that needs to be stabilized right now and we just don't have the capacity for it. So that's the pro of living in a big city, is you can depend on other clinics and other emergency hospitals.
Definitely. Thank you.
So I've been through a few different jobs. So what your day-to-day looks like can be very different. So if you're in a 24-hour hospital setting, like Yui says, you've got inpatients to look after. Whereas now I work in a day-only clinic. So that means at the end of the day, we don't keep anything hospitalized and the patients get transferred to an external clinic. Day-to-day wise, you basically do a mix of consults and operating can be anywhere from removing tumors to spaying and neuters, and you can also get like ultrasound scans and bloods and workups. In terms of what happened after COVID, there was a huge influx of new clients, certainly in the UK, and we saw like a crazy amount of new registrations and puppies and kittens over the pandemic. That's still kind of carrying on. So we've had to shut our books to new clients and be really selective of who we see. And in the UK as well, it's the same as Yui. It's kind of the curbside consultations, which has been really interesting in some respects. And yeah, there's some pretty funny stories about being drenched in rainwater from our staff, because it basically was a taste of working as a farm vet, I guess, being outdoors in a way.
Yeah, definitely. The raincoat coming in useful that you'd bought for your trip around the sky.
So yeah, similarly for me, I think since COVID started, clients not being allowed in the building, another change I've realized was we did more remote prescribing. That's recently changed in the UK. We're not supposed to do that anymore. But in the very beginning, when the pandemic started, we did a lot of phone consultations to avoid people coming in if that's not necessary, and just really focusing on animal welfare, whether they need to be seen. Other than that, in terms of my day-to-day, I used to be in general practice, so quite similar in description with Yuri and Mary's day-to-day. At the moment, I'm doing a rotating internship at a referral hospital. So I go through all the different disciplines and sort of experience what it's like to work with and as a specialist. So it would depend on what the department is doing. So it still is a combination of consults and procedures and inpatients. But yeah, it depends on who I'm with, because it varies a lot.
Sounds incredible. Yeah, just even if it could get more varied, it somehow has.
Yes. Absolutely.
No, that sounds incredible. And from your day to day, what's the sort of one aspect that you truly love and keeps you going on a morning and gets you up? Or what's one aspect that you sort of have a smile when you see it come through?
So I think for me, it's two things. One is, especially right now, I really enjoy working with the team at work. We try to make it fun, because a lot of the times it is not a fun type of work. It could be very stressful and emotionally difficult. So having that sort of team that's supportive and also just, able to joke around and laugh is big. Another, I think this might be like an obvious one, is watching patients getting better. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, it really does make you kind of realize that you're doing this for, a good reason. And that sense of fulfillment is definitely there. And then the clients coming back and, thanking you, and sometimes with like a basket full of cookies, there's always like a nice little, brownie point.
Yeah, definitely. Truly magical moments, I bet.
So there's two aspects of my job that are my favorite. One is surgery. I really enjoy being in surgery because I'm a very hands-on person. So being able to get to that point every day, it's like, I love that part of my job. The other part is actually euthanasias. So it always comes to the point that you're saying goodbye to people's pets with them. And for me, that's a really special, a really meaningful moment. Especially if you have a long-term patient or long-term client that's really bonded with you. It's actually such a privilege to be there and help them say goodbye. And it's always very upsetting and never gets any easier. But for me, that's also, I think, a really a part of my job that I wouldn't say enjoy doing, but I think it's a really special part of the job that has changed over the years. And I've kind of, that being able to say goodbye with long-term clients has become one of my favorite things to do.
Of course. And is that something that you've sort of noticed grow the more you've done it, the more you've had to do euthanasias, you sort of become so routine that you've noticed the speciality on it?
Yeah, I think certainly, like, I think all vets would agree that you need a certain amount of detachment in a way, because it's a very emotional job. And sometimes you have to go from euthanizing an elderly pet and your next consult coming in is like a cute puppy, and you have to put up a smile for the next client. So it can be very emotional and tough. So it's not always, you can't always treat every single patient in that same way, but the ones that you certainly bond with that start to mean a lot to you, some of the clients even treat you like a part of the family, and it's actually quite an emotional moment and quite special to be a part of. Yeah,
definitely quite inclusive, very private sort of moment.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's really just, I think all vets would agree, it's just about making difference in an animal's life in a positive way, and just being able to be their advocate, just be in the position to be able to speak up for them, because that's what we went to school for and what we want to do. So yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. And what's one thing that you really wish you'd known before becoming a vet?
I would have wished somebody would have told me really the mental health side of it.
Definitely the strain and
the strain, there is a high number of depression in our field, I think both in the US and the UK. And, definitely one of the biggest problem we're facing is the high suicide rate as well. And it's starting to change. We're starting to really try and, tackle this issue from a systemic point. But I do wish that I was a little bit more prepared in the aspect of how challenging it could be for me from a mental and emotional side.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for being so open on that. And
You're welcome.
So for me, and I can be really brutally honest, it's the debt of going to university. Like, I personally am very lucky. I graduated with no debt, but I know from speaking to a lot of colleagues, it's not the case, especially if you're an international student going into a degree like this. So in my year, the tuition fee was £23,000 a year, and times 5 if it's 5 years. And I know it's gone up to more like 30K a year, and even more in the US. So the reality is, I think this contributes to a lot of mental health problems in the profession, is if you qualify and graduate with that degree of debt, realistically, it's actually really hard and difficult to pay that off in the UK. So I know I have a good friend in the States. She would have loved to stay and practice in the UK, but she couldn't because the salary in the UK is a lot less than the US. So that kind of restricted her. And it definitely sets you back. And if I honestly would actually say I love this profession, but if the debt is going to be a huge issue for someone personally, I would actually be looking at other career choices. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of people as well.
Definitely. And that's sort of the hands down insight, which is really, really interesting to hear. No, thank you.
I think for me, definitely mental health is a massive thing. And secondly, that being a vet also involves a lot talking to people. That's something I didn't think about when I applied. I do like people, but it's a lot. It's as much to do with people as it is with animals. To be able to achieve what you want with a pet, you do need to get a client on board, and that's something I didn't realize before I went into it. And it's so important. It almost becomes more important than what you do in how you talk to them. That's a big part I wish someone had mentioned to me.
The irony being that you chose the career to help the animals and then have to
Absolutely.
spend more time dealing with the
people.
humans behind
Yeah,
them.
I mean, absolutely, there are so many good people out there, but there are also some very challenging clients, and that also is a source of mental health issues, I think, in the profession. It goes both ways. There are some that make the job, but also some that really break it. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much, and I'm so sorry I robbed some extra time off you, but it's been so kind. I've got one more question, and it's hopefully looking to the future, and this is just where do you think vet science is going in the future, how it might have changed as with the development of COVID. And with the general trends in the population and sustainability and things like that, where might we see, hopefully on a positive front, vet science is going?
So I think that especially with climate change and all these talks about sustainability, because we are at the forefront of the One Health aspect, I do think that there will probably be more opportunities there career-wise, whether that's through research or academic, who knows?
Exactly.
I do know that there's a few UK schools that are looking into including sustainability issues in their curriculum, which I think is amazing. So I do hope that that's kind of where we're headed. And it should be where we're headed as well. It's a really important topic of discussion and advancement.
Definitely. And just quickly, could you give a brief synopsis of One Health? Okay. One welfare, if that's possible.
No, that's
if
good.
That's possible.
No, that's okay. I was stuttering earlier when I was trying to describe One Health. So One Health is basically a multidisciplinary approach, which is recognized by the World Health Organization as well as the CDC and the OIE, which is the European Animal Health Organization, where we look into the connection of human health, animal health, and environmental health. And One Welfare is basically the same, but more holistic and inclusive, and it includes the welfare connection of animals, human, and environmental sustainability. I'm not going to go into details because we don't have time, but COVID-19 is a perfect example of a One Health issue, as well as a lot of emerging zoonotic diseases, foodborne diseases as well. So it's, that's basically the summary of One Health, One Welfare.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So I think that hopefully there will be a massive improvement on staff and clinical welfare to improve mental health, because there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years with the shortage of veterinary surgeons across the world, and it's been made more urgent by COVID and the increase in workload. I think people are struggling more, and therefore, I don't know about the US, but certainly in the UK, the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, they are putting a lot more emphasis and talk about mental health, which hopefully in the long run means that practices will be prepared to offer more flexibility and different ways of working. I think before COVID, no one would have ever thought about working from home for a vet, as in like remote prescribing and telemedicine, but that's certainly become a hot topic. And I think because the profession is now, don't quote me on this, but at least 95% female, it's now become, so that sort of trying to cater for people at different life stages has become a lot more important for veterinary practices if they want to retain their staff.
Definitely. Wow, that's huge. I hadn't realized.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with mental health being less of a stigma nowadays, people actually talking about it. And with COVID, we have been having, increases in pet ownership, I'm sure around the world. But with that, I think the profession is also continuously trying to improve standards of care. It is just getting better, which is good for the animals. And another thing with sustainability is I think practices are trying to get more green as well. So there's a practice called Davies Veterinary Group. I think they won the Sustainability Award recently, and I think a lot of practices are following suit to try to make just general veterinary practice better for the environment.
That's so kind. No, that's incredible. Is there anything else you guys would like to add? Anything else? Burning desires? No? Wonderful. I mean, no, but thank you so much for all of your time, and I'm so sorry for going over. There was just so much valuable information that was there. And I think we can all agree that you guys have spent some really excellent time with us today, giving us valuable insights into the life and education of vets, as well as into the wonderful areas of specialism you can go into, key highlights, as well as things to watch out for maybe. So thank you so much for being so open and honest. Quick thank you to the viewers, and I'm sure you all agree that our amazing panelists have done a fantastic job and provided some crucial information that I hope will help you and inspire you to make your decisions. And with that, thank you so much again to our panelists, and thank you all. Thank you guys. That's been incredible, really incredible.
Thank you so much, Harry. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.